Hello and welcome. I'm Lalam Techana with today's news. Tigray's armed forces captured the strategic town of Tenta in Warahimenu and Akbar, and they are advancing towards the strategic town of Borona and Warailu. Tigray's forces are also advancing west of Kombolcha towards strategic area in Kasa Gita. Meanwhile, on Sunday, Tigray's armed forces captured Kombolcha, overwhelming Ethiopian defense forces, Amhara militia, and Fano Vigilante group. Tigray's forces are now advancing to the south of Kombolcha to Kamisi and Harbo. East of Kombolcha, Tigrayan forces have taken control of Gerba, Bati, Burka on the 1st of November as they continue their advance to the strategic town of Mille in Afar. Ethiopian forces launched what they called final offensive in early October with Tigrayan counteroffensive, leading to significant gains over the past week. Tigray's military command post has repeatedly condemned Ethiopian forces' attempts to use civilians as human shields throughout this conflict, especially in the past week as they attempted to resist Tigrayan forces' capture of city of Dessie and Kombolcha. U.S. President Joe Biden has announced that U.S. President Joe Biden has announced that Ethiopia has been stripped off from its Africa Growth Opportunity Act privileges for a gross violation of human rights. The United States had warned months ago that it would dismiss Ethiopia from Africa Growth Opportunities Act that offered privilege to specific African countries to import finished goods into the United States. The decision to strip Ethiopia of its privileges, according to President Joe Biden, came after advance notification to terminate its privilege due to gross violations of internationally recognized human rights. Biden states that despite intensive engagement between the United States and the government of Ethiopia, the Ethiopian government has failed to address the United States' concerns about its non-compliance with AGOA eligibility criteria. President Joe Biden announced that the termination will take effect as of January 1st, 2022. Ethiopia was stripped of its privilege along with two other countries, Guinea and Mali. As bombardments of Mekelle by Ethiopian air forces continue, an airstrike on Thursday, October 28, struck a residential area in Mekelle, killing 10 innocent civilians, including children. Additionally, 30 people were injured and 15 homes completely destroyed. For more, Aragawi reports.
On October 28, 2021, an aerial strike would hit near a residential area in Mekelle for the 7th time in under 2 weeks, destroying 15 homes, killing 10 civilians, and injuring over 30. Sister Nebat Gabra, the emergency coordinator of Eider Hospital, describes the situation as follows.
The airstrike on October 28 injured more than 30, including children and elders. 10 people also died. The latest airstrike in Mekelle was the worst of the ones we have seen this week. The bodies of the deceased were dismembered, so much we couldn't identify them. In some cases, we couldn't tell if they were human or not.
Yodit lost her child during the airstrike. She was also heavily injured. She cannot speak because she has so many stitches on her face.
حيلو تبهال كابزون بعصر شمون تقلت دوداب زوجهم حنتيا.
The victim's name is Yodit Hailu. She is one of the victims of October 28th airstrike. She is heavily injured. She was injured on her head, her face, her hand, and her leg. The worst is the injury on her face. She can't speak because of the stitches on her face. That is why she couldn't communicate with you.
Miss Schweinisch is Yodit's sister. She says she has heartbroken by what unfolded. She has this to say to the world.
This is not an isolated incident. The airstrikes have become daily. He needs to be stopped. He should be sanctioned. I have never heard of airstrikes that bombarded civilian residents.
Shawit is Yodit's neighbor. She was there when the attack took place. We found her at Ida Referral Hospital, came to visit Yodit. She has this to say about Yodit's condition.
أو طقا إيش خابي ينيرة كأون جزاون أو طقا سلزخونة جزا يخون إلى أوريد نيرة.
I was near where the attack took place. I thought the blast had reached our neighborhood. When I reached to where the attack took place, I saw Yodi soaked in blood, crying and calling for her children. We were not able to go in and help her because an electric wire had fallen near the door. We could see another girl on the floor. She had been shocked by the electricity as she was trying to help Yodit. Help finally arrived and take her to the hospital. She lost her first son, but no one has told her yet. We didn't think she could bear it.
Tsige is another victim of the airstrike. She was managed to save herself after her house was destroyed but sustained an injury as she was trying to help Yodit. She has this to say about the aerial attack.
شمي تجي ما دسبال أو جزا وشتينا نيرنا تجزا مسفرسنا وبينا ندقوزي.
My name is Ige Meles. We were at home when the house fell apart. I managed to run out of the house through the debris. My family were all right, my neighbor next door. But there had been an electric wire next to the door and it shocked me. The situation during the airstrike was so horrible. It is so difficult to explain. It was so horrible. I just saw a flash of fire and then dust started to fall on my body. It was horrible. It's so difficult to explain. This is so inhuman. It's so senseless, so inhuman, so devilish. I don't know what can I say. How can someone do this to civilians? I have no words.
Sharon, a 16-year-old child. She lost her eyesight due to the Thursday's airstrike. We found her at the pediatric ward at Idor Hospital. She was still in shock, but her father was able to speak with us.
كلها أنا سرحي نيرة عند خرقو جزا فريسو كل بفتح شيء لعلم في أم الله فريسز بعيد عن دربية كلام سز بعيد عن.
When I came home from work, I didn't find anything but debris and blood. I found my family at hospital injured. My wife is following up on her left eye at Kwiha Hospital, but you can see Sharon here. As you can see, she has lost her eyesight.
Miss Salam is Sharon's mother, and she herself is one of the victims. Her left eye was heavily injured, and she also has injuries on her head. As her house was completely destroyed, she is currently sheltered at her sister's house, while the rest of her children are scattered to the homes of other relatives in search of shelter. She has this to say about the situation.
We were home when the airstrike happened. The children were also with me. Then suddenly the house fell on the top of us. I was bleeding, but I managed to pick up my son and go outside. My eldest daughter, Sarun, was badly injured. It was others that pulled her out. She is now at Idar Hospital. We are just sitting home when the incident happened. But we were not the only victims. Many have died and sustained injured. I have a lot of wounds on my head and left eye. There was a splinter of glass on my left eye. The doctors are trying to remove them. This is the second procedure today. Our house was completely destroyed. It just looks like open space now. I don't know what has been destroyed and what's left. I was soaked in blood and in shock when I left. Now I'm living with my sister and Saron is at Idar Hospital. The rest of my family are with other relatives. We are all dispersed. I wish this could end peacefully. There is nothing in war but loss.
The 4-month-long siege that has discontinued all basic services, including aid and medical supplies, have made it impossible for victims of airstrike to receive the necessary medical treatment, says Sister Nabiat.
لأنا بتعم خويدنا للونا كان السوي حمام بتقعد حمام تقعد يوم زمن ساعات.
The scarcity of resources is the main problem. Units of the hospital that treated patients with chronic illness are being closed. For example, the unit for kidney dialysis is already closed as we were not able to give service due to shortage of resources. It is so difficult to have patients coming in but nothing to treat them with. It breaks your heart to not treat patients because of lack of medication. We cried to the world but nothing has been done. The pain is as much on us as it is on the patients.
In related news, our reporters had also visited a residential area hit by airstrikes last week and were able to witness firsthand the devastation caused on families. For more, Aragawi reports again.
Miss Nigsti Gabramariam is mother of one of the many victims of October 28 airstrike. She was at her place of work when the airstrike destroyed her home. She has this to say about the incident.
The attack took place on Thursday, October 28, 2014, around 11 a.m. I was at work when my home was. When I came home, I found it was completely destroyed and police officers were everywhere. I insisted that they let me in so I could see my children, but they wouldn't let me in. Then they brought a car and took me to Ida Referral Hospital to see my children. Finally, they told me that I had lost my grandson. 4 of our tenants had died. One was a mother of 2 and her son injured my daughter also heavily injured, and her husband also injured his eye. My grandson is also dead. He was just 5 years old.
Mr. Hailo Hagos is Nigisti's husband. He himself was not at home when the attack happened, but he has this to say about the attack.
I was not home when the attack happened. My wife was also not home. The tenants and my children were at the house. 4 of our tenants died. The 5th one is my grandson, a 5-year-old child. The bomb was dropped in the middle of the house. There are fragments of the bomb there. The house, as a result of 30 years of hard work, is destroyed completely, and my son-in-law's car was also destroyed.
Johannes Hadish is 22 years old. He was near his house when the airstrike hit. His mother was one of the casualties, leaving behind Johannes and his younger brother. We found them sheltering at the house of his mother's friend. He has this to say about the horrible event.
The airstrike took place on October 28, 2021. On that day, we were not home. We left home early at 6 a.m. While we were out, the air came and started hovering over the sky. Then we were told to disperse in fear of the attack. My mother went home before me. Then the air dropped the bomb on our house. I ran home, and what I saw was really terrible. I found the house completely destroyed. I couldn't remember anything other than this. I was in a complete daze when I saw the destruction. I found myself at the hospital as my brother had injured his head, but I don't know how I went to the hospital, whether it's on foot or by car. I have no idea.
Kaflom Hadish is 19 years old. He is one of the victims of the aerial strike. He is still traumatized by the incident, as he was forced to see his mother's body. He has this to say about the airstrike.
I was near my house when the attack took place on Thursday, October 28. After the attack, I ran to my home as fast as I could, and there were bodies everywhere. I had head injury, but there are others with heavy injuries to the extent of losing their eyesight and badly injured over the face. My mom has died, and 3 others from one family. I saw their bodies, including my mom's, with my own naked eyes, and that was horrific.
Selaskide is neighbor. She was at home during the incident. She has this to say about the aerial attack.
When the bombs were dropped, the whole area was covered with dirt and smoke. The house was turned into ashes, and corrugated irons were flying everywhere. Though the security officers wouldn't allow us to enter into the remnants of our home, we saw blood and water everywhere. As all the houses were destroyed, many are left without a home. Gidai, 3 others from one family, and a 5-year-old child of the owners of the house were killed.
Harog is mother of 3. Her house was among many others destroyed during the airstrike. She has this to say about the incident.
I was outside my house when the house was destroyed, but 5 of my family members were inside. The incident was horrible. I had a small shop and 3 of my children were there. My daughter was in the bathroom and Latai was in the kitchen. After the incident, I was not myself. People were digging to save the victims, and they managed to pick up my children and sent them to the hospital. The worst happened to my neighbors next door. There were dismembered bodies of many victims there. The incident was very horrible and hard to explain.
Elsa Meles is Harog's daughter. She was one of the victims of the aerial strike, along with her 2-year-old child. She describes the horrible incident as follows.
We were at home, and I was in the bathroom, and my sister was in the kitchen. Then everything happened within seconds. The house fell over us. Everything happened instantly. As the place was filled with smoke, we were suffocated. Then people came and saved us.
Abtu Gabrehut is one of the victims of the aerial strike. He was not at home when the attack took place, but his house is completely destroyed, and his 4-year-old child was injured.
I left my families at home early in the morning that day. This is Della, my daughter. My wife and my youngest son were also with her. After the attack took place, I came home to check on my family. When I reached there, I saw the house was completely destroyed. I rented a house from Haragu. The house next door is also my uncle's house. That was also completely destroyed. My nephew, who's as old as my daughter, had died. I didn't find my family there. And finally, I found them at the hospital. My wife and my son were fine, but my little daughter injured her head and her back.
Miss Abrahat Gabra is a neighbor of the victims. She was around the bombardment area during the attack. She has this to say about the aerial strike.
The incident happened on Thursday, October 28th. In the beginning, there was a jet hovering all over the sky, and another jet came and dropped bombs. At first, we were all terrified as the ground shook. But when we came to our senses, we learned that the attack had damaged Hailu and Haragu's house. We hurried over. I was shocked by the scene. I couldn't describe it with words, but it was very horrible. The bodies of the dead people were collected with a canvas. We heard of such kinds of stories before, but never experienced it firsthand.
The attack on Thursday, October 28th, was just one of the many that have bombarded Mekelle in the past 2 weeks. Many have lost their lives and property. And the worst of all, it seems there is no clear end in sight.
Ethiopian National Defense Forces carried out air bombardment in Tzra Womberta district, just 33 kilometers north of Tigray's capital, Mekelle, on Sunday, October 30, 2021. The explosive landed on a farmland with no casualties or injuries reported so far. This is just one of over a dozen airstrikes conducted on innocent civilians in Tigray. Daras Prahana reports.
Mohammed Tahir and his father are farmers in Tzra Womberta district, 33 kilometers north of Mekelle. They were collecting their harvest and looking after their cattle when a fighter jet dropped explosives on their farm, destroying their harvests.
Our harvests have been destroyed. I have no words to express the evil of Abiy Ahmed. This is fascism. You can't imagine something like this could happen here. On civilian property, targeting civilians, this must stop. The world has to act now.
I was near the farmland when the bomb was dropped. I was in shock and I laid on the ground to take cover. The harvest has been completely destroyed by the airstrike. This is Habib's harvest. His harvest is also completely destroyed. This is a fragment from the bomb. It hit me and my cow.
Abad Hailu is also a resident of the district. He says he's outraged by the repeated attacks on civilians and civilian property.
Genocide is being committed on the people of Tigray. They're incapable of beating our forces on the battlefield, so they have instead chosen to kill our livestock and destroy our harvest.
Sunday's airstrike is just one of over a dozen conducted in Tigray. In the past 2 weeks, the airstrikes have been targeting civilians and civilian property and have been repeatedly condemned by international bodies, including the United Nations.
Abiy Ahmed's government has closed all humanitarian corridors coming to Tigray, as well as discontinuing all public services, including banking. Among 1 of the million affected are retired public servants that are predominantly depend on income from their pensions. Haile Gabra reports.
One of the most telling parts of the genocide against Tigrayans has been the suspension of banking services in Tigray, including the discontinuation of government employees' salaries and pensions since late June, leaving hundreds of thousands of families across Tigray are in a dire situation. Mr. Gede Gaberselassie is one of many that depended on his monthly income from his pension. He earned 1,400 birr each month. Though it was not enough, he used this income to feed himself and 5 members of his family. It has now been 4 months since he had received his pension.
We
have not received our pension since July 2021. It has been very difficult. We are old and we have children that depend on our income. We don't know what we can do. We will starve to death.
ናይ ሽኮር ዘለዎም ኣለው እዮም ሕሙማት
There is no medical supply. There are people with diabetes and hypertension. God forbidden, should we catch an illness, we will not be able to get treatment. Our pension barely get us pass through the months, but now everything is blocked by the federal government.
Our lives have become difficult since Abiy Ahmed's government discontinued our pension. We cannot survive at all. Everyone that depends on their pension as income is devastated now.
There are 75 to 100,000 pension beneficiaries under the Office of Social Security Agency in Tigray. Mr. Kimfadan is head for the Office of the Federal Social Security Agency Tigray branch. Mr. Kimfa has stated the difficulty of the situation as follows.
Pension beneficiaries haven't received their income in 5 months, so they are in a difficult situation. They don't have another job or source of income. These people have young children that cannot comprehend the situation. A lot of them are also suffering from communicable disease.
According to the report from the Social Security Agency office, there are also 446 pension beneficiaries from private institutions who lead households with 1,200 family members. Their pension has also been discontinued. Mr. Gabrakidan Hadush, Social Security Agency Office Director for Private Institutions in Tigray, has this to say.
People may say, I may be retired due to age, or they may have gotten into an accident and are no longer generating an income, so that I should ensure in a pension framework with government. However, I witnessed the government betrays. People may want to join the pension framework, so it can be cause of use when they age or get into an accident, but they may choose not to do so. Now, because they have seen the government has betrayed those already in the system.
Should the discontinuation of basic services continue, these public servants are just one of the millions that will face crisis.
Earlier this year, the United Nations announced that it would be undertaking an investigation of all atrocities committed in Tigray, jointly with the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission, a government-appointed body. Despite the outcry of Tigrayans across the world, the United Nations says it has completed its investigation and will be announcing its findings tomorrow, November 3, 2021, while experts continue to cast doubts on the investigation's findings. For more, Fanuel Emuru reports.
The joint investigation by the United Nations Human Rights Commission and the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission is the only investigation that has so far been undertaken on atrocities committed in Tigray. The Ethiopian government continues to block media and human rights groups from coming into Tigray. But the investigation and its findings are questioned by different Tigrayans and human rights groups. David Crane, founder of the Global Accountability Network and founding chief prosecutor for the Special Court of Sierra Leone and International Tribunal, told Associated Press, "What you need when you go into an atrocity zone is a clean slate so outside investigators can look into it neutrally and dispassionately, saying the report might perish in the sand of time. According to these reasons, this report is automatically suspect," Crane said. Sources who asked to remain anonymous told Associated Press that the head of Ethiopian Human Rights Commission, Daniel Bekele, underplayed allegations committed by Amhara forces and pressed instead of highlight atrocities by Tigray forces, even though witnesses said most of the hostilities were committed by ENDF, Amhara regional forces, and forces from neighboring Eritrea. But the investigation will remain suspect, and not only that, but the investigation failed to visit the scenes where most suspected massacres were carried out, like Axum.
The Ethiopian government has announced that it has extended the suspension of Norway Refugee Agency. In July 2021, the Ethiopian government had announced that it had suspended 3 international non-profit organizations for 3 months. The organizations had worked on humanitarian intervention programs across the country, but especially in Tigray. One of such organizations was Norway Refugee Agency. The NRC has 3 aid organizations working under it and has provided education, clean water, sanitation facilities, food and shelter to over 500,000 people in Ethiopia since 2011 up to 2020. But its activities were suspended in July this year after Ethiopian authorities accused the organization of false propaganda and unauthorized placement of its employees without informing government authorities. The NRC denied the accusation. The director of the NRC, Nigel Trix, said he is deeply disappointed by the decision of Ethiopian authorities to extend the suspensions, but would further communicate with Ethiopian authorities to get details as they seek a speedy return to previous levels of collaboration with the Ethiopian government. In the past year, Ethiopian-based media and media personalities have used hate speech as an instrument. In the past week, there has been a major spike of hate speech against Tigrayans across the country, with on media personality asking for all Tigrayans to be taken to concentration camps. For more, Winta Kidana reports.
While the definition of genocide can be debated technically, politically, and legally, according to the Genocide Convention under Article 2, genocide means any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group, as such, killing members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group, forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. Since November 4, when the Ethiopian forces started their aggression on Tigray, genocidal rhetoric, which is one of many indicators of genocide, has been used as an instrument by higher government officials as well as individuals calling for the killing and arrest of Tigrayans.
እነዚህ ሰዎችና እነዚህን ሰዎች የመሰሉ ሰዎች እንዳይደገሙ ማድረግ ነው። እነሱ የመጨረሻ ሆነው እንዲቀሩ እዚህ በኋላ እነሱን የመሰለ ሰው እንዳይፈጠር መደረግ አለበት። በምንም መልኩ እንደምታውቁት ሰይጣን ከወደቀ በኋላ ሰይጣን የሚመስል ሌላ አልተፈጠረም። ከሰይጣን የመጨረሻው ሆኖ ነው የቀረው። እነሱም የመጨረሻው ሆኖ መቅረት አለባቸው። ከዚህ በኋላ በመደገም ይሄን ሊደግም የሚችል እንዲህ አይነት አረም ሊያፈራ የሚችል ምንም አይነት መሬት መፈጠር የለበትም እዚች ሀገር። ስለዚህ ሁሉ ጊዜም ቢሆን ለልጆቻችን ከዚህ በኋላ የክፉ ነገር ምሳሌ የማስፈራሪያ ማድረግ ያለብን እነሱን ነው። ከዚህ በፊት ልጆቻችንን እንዲህ ካደረክ ጭራቅ ይበላሃል ብለን ነበር የምናስፈራራቸው። አሁን የጭራቅ ዘመን ማለፍ አለበት። እነሱ ይበሉሃል ብለን ነው መናገር ያለብን። ማስፈራሪያ ነው መሆን ያለባቸው። ሰው እንዳይደግመው እንደነሱ አይነት ሰው ዳግም እንዳይፈጠር እዚች ሀገር እንዳይታሰብ ከመዋቅራዊ ቦታቸው ብቻ አይደለም ማስወገድ ያለብን፣ ከሰው ህሊና ከሰው ልቡና ውስጥ ከታሪክ መዝገብ ውስጥ ነው ተፈቀው መጥፋት ያለባቸው። ምናልባት ስለነሱ የሚያጠና ሰው ወደፊት መሬት ቆፍሮ ያገኝ እንጂ ምንም አይነት ነገር እንዳያገኝ ነው ማድረግ ያለበት።
The antagonism went as far as comparing human life to simple mathematics of 1 minus 1 is 0.
ዝም ብለን በነፃ ከመሞት አንድ ትግሬ ገለን ብንሞት ዋጋ አለው። ምናልባት የትግራይ ህዝብ ብዛቱ 6 ሚሊዮን ነው። የአማራ ህዝብ የህዝብ ብዛት ደግሞ ወደ 30 ሚሊዮን የሚጠጋ ነው። ምናልባት እንኳን 6 ሚሊዮን ህዝብ ለትግራይ ብቻ ብንመድብ ሌላው ህዝብ ነፃ ሊወጣ ይችላል።
Ethiopian officials, state as well as private media have all normalized the use of hate speech against Tigrais.
የህዝብ የመላ ኢትዮጵያ ህዝብ ጠላት ነው። የህዝብ የኦሮሞ ጠላት ነው። የህዝብ የአፋሩ ጠላት ነው። የጋምቤላ ጠላት ነው። የሶማሌው ጠላት ነው።
ISAT, a media organization founded by funds from the Eritrean government, has been at the front of disseminating hate speech and disinformation about the people of Tigray. One of the many calls for the genocide against Tigrais would be from this channel. On September 4, 2016, Mesai Mokanen, a journalist at ISAT, would call for the elimination of 5 million Tigrayans, saying the fate of another 95 million would depend on it.
Would የኢትዮጵያም ወገናችን ወይም ይህ የጥፋት እቅድ የታቀደው ከ5 ሚሊዮን ህዝብ ለ95 ሚሊዮን ህዝብ ነው። የተበላሸና አሳን ከባህር ማስወገጃ መንገዱ አንዱ ነው የባህር ውሃ ማስወገድ።
ISAT and Mesai Mokanen have continued to attack civilians living across Ethiopia, this time calling on Tigrayans to be taken to concentration camps.
Urgent message to the government. It is not too late. It is necessary to enter every one of Tigrayans to descend, even if they have no connection to TPLF in temporary camps. During the Second World War, the United States was able to win the war against invading Japanese forces and Hitler army only after entering all Japanese citizens living in the country in camps. Ethiopia is now in more imminent danger. It is widely believed that the main actors in the struggle for Dessie are TPLF supporters among the people. It is impossible to win the war with them in our midst. This step should be taken urgently, including for their own safety.
Genocidal rhetoric has shown a sharp uptick as Tigray's armed force continue to make gains on the battlefield. Social media was flooded by hate speech against Tigrayans, with the call by Mesai Mokonnen being only the beginning of a range of calls against innocent civilians living across the country.
The war is with your long-time neighbor, the person who grew up with you, but who, in partiality to his own ethnicity, has classified you and your people as enemies. The war is with traitor you have raised and fed. If you can clear and control these wild tones and chameleons in your boson, don't even doubt that victory is yours, and you know who they are. Do it even if it grieves you. You willn't be any cruel than they are. History is going to remember who was cruel and who was a traitor and who was merciless. Let this be done starting from today in Dessie, Kombolcha, Habro, Addis Ababa, and every city. You will immediately see the change.
The fast spread of information enabled by social media has meant that irresponsible messages such as Mesai are able to spread faster and more widely. But the question remains, will the world play its part to ensure the Ethiopian government and its allies will be held accountable for their crimes against the people of Tigray?
General Tzadkan Gabretensay, a former Chief of Staff of Ethiopia's National Defense Forces and a member of Tigray Central Command, gave an interview to Tigray television this past week. The general says that he believes the conflict is between a government desperate to return Ethiopia to its former unitary structure that had nearly led to its demise and a people that refuse to give up their right for self-determination. Abel Tsagabu reports.
General Tzadkan, a member of Tigray Central Command, had a brief stay with Tigray television to discuss what he believes has triggered Ethiopia's descent. In his interview, the general says that the war is not a simple question of power but an extension of fundamental political difference in the nation-building process, and considered the alleged attack on the Northern Command a pretext for a war that had been planned for well over 2 years.
ከዛ በፊት አንዳንድ ስትራቴጂክ ናቸው የሚሏቸውን ጦር መሳሪያዎች
There were some attempts to move weapons out of Tigray. That is, the Tigrayan government was opposing. Finally, the central government decided to change the high-ranking generals of Northern Command. The relationship they had with the Arab countries was also unhealthy, since it was known that the mastermind Isaias Afwerki was behind the moves to mobilize forces, and the contradiction in psychological warfare between the Tigrayan regional government and the central government. With all these, the commanders of the Ethiopian army were in a dilemma. Some wanted to protect the constitution in their oaths, and others wanted to follow their commands. And then the only choice the government of Tigray had was to either surrender or to defend itself and take the necessary measures. So this story about attack on the Northern Command wasn't the real reason behind the start of the war. It was a pretext to mobilize Ethiopians and criminalize the government of Tigray. The fundamental cause was a clash on how a nation-building process should unfold.
General Tzadkan also commented on Eritrea's involvement in the conflict and said that the Eritrean government had been preparing to partake in the conflict for a long time.
አንድ መታወቅ ያለበት ነገር ምንድነው? የኤርትራ መንግስት ሌላ
There is one thing that should be noted. The Eritrean government has done nothing in the past years but train soldiers and prepare for war, drafting anyone over the age of 18. And any money received was spent on weaponry, was all it did. We tried to break the army so that it wouldn't be able to carry on fighting. They also used the disguise of the so-called attack on the North Command. The Eritrean government joined before the missile was fired. We almost fought for about a week in Zalambasa before the strike. It was a white lie.
The former chief of Ethiopia's forces also said he had made repeated attempts to help solve the issues amicably but found that Abiy Ahmed were not interested.
ሰላም እንዲፈታ ከጦርነት በመለስ ባለው ጉዳይ እንዲፈታ
I have attempted to help the two parties address fundamental concerns. It didn't work because the other party wasn't interested in finding a peaceful solution. I discussed with the Prime Minister. I also discussed with the President of Tigray. I asked both of them to accept the constitution as a bare minimum to solve their differences. The government of Tigray accepted while Abiy refused and clearly illustrated that he had no appetite for a peaceful resolution. I heard the Prime Minister say in his own words that he thought the Ethiopian army couldn't repel Tigray's forces. There cannot be any better political admission than this. After destroying a professional army built for years, now they are saying that they will launch people's war. I don't take this seriously. The war is over. It's only a matter of time. Thanks for watching. That's it for now. Till next time, take care.